Good afternoon and welcome to the final event of CMS's 2022 celebration of Women's History Month. Today we're excited to bring you 4 fabulous women working across various in-demand careers in state government for a roundtable discussion about their roles, careers, and advice for those considering public service. And to give plenty of time for our panelists, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to them. First today we have Takira Wilkerson, Home Administrator at the Department of Veterans Affairs, newest veterans home in Chicago. Takira joined DVA in July of 2020, where she has led all efforts to open the doors of the home to veterans, from recruiting, hiring, and training a staff dedicated to caring for veterans with compassion, focusing on details of interactive artwork, green spaces, and comfortable living areas that have made the space a place for its residents to enjoy their surroundings and feel cared for with dignity, and overseeing the important details of safety, compliance, and accreditation. Managing these very different elements of a home requires not just institutional knowledge and best practices, but also an understanding of the standards of an Illinois Department of Veterans Affairs skilled nursing home. It is just that. It is the veterans' home. Takira came to DVA with a 20-year-long career in long-term care, home care, and in the mental health field. She's a graduate of Western Illinois University. She and her husband, Demond, a U.S. Navy veteran, live in Chicago and have 2 boys. Thank you for joining us today, Takira.
Thank you.
We're also excited to be joined by Laura Renzing, Bureau Chief of Construction at the Illinois Department of Transportation. Laura has served the Illinois Department of Transportation since 2000, serving in various capacities before becoming the Bureau Chief of Construction. In that time, Laura has gained valuable experience in various areas of the department, particularly within the areas of planning, design, and construction. Laura is a licensed professional engineer, having graduated from Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, with her civil engineering degree. As statewide engineer of construction, she oversees approximately 3,000 construction contracts across the state of Illinois, with an average annual value of a whopping $2 billion. She remains active in public service organizations, serving in leadership roles for many years, and serving as an instructor for statewide technical training, where she received an award for Class of the Year 2 consecutive years and was instrumental in planning and developing IDOT's Technical Innovative Ideas Contest, which celebrates and recognizes innovation achievements by department employees. Thank you so much for joining us, Laura. We are also just thrilled to be joined by Robin Woolery, Deputy Director of the Division of Forensic Services at the Illinois State Police. Robin began her work with ISP in 2001 after nearly a decade of forensics work with the Drug Enforcement Agency and Iowa state government. Robin worked her way up the ISP forensic ranks, moving from an analyst to supervisor to lab director and assistant deputy director for the division before being promoted to deputy director. In her current role, she oversees more than 400 employees, forensic scientists, evidence technicians, crime scene investigators, traffic crash reconstruction officers, and statewide evidence vault technicians. Robin is a graduate of Dillard University and Northwestern University, where she completed her master's degree in biochemistry, molecular biology, and cell biology before beginning her forensics career. Thank you for joining us, Robin.
Thank you for having me.
And last but certainly not least, we are joined by Dessajipilo, Chief Data Officer at the Illinois Department of Innovation and Technology. Dessa is also a recent addition to the state's arsenal of fantastic women, but she brings with her over a decade of experience in government, nonprofits, and organizing spaces. Dessa was the inaugural Chief Data Officer for Cook County, Illinois, and has led a variety of data analytics teams. She is skilled at creating a culture of data and analytics and building data foundations at scale. Dessa holds a Bachelor of Arts in History and Business Administration from Roanoke College and is an alum of the Civic Leadership Academy through the University of Chicago. Dessa, thank you so, so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So let's hear a little bit more about your role in public service. So particularly, I'm going to go around and give you guys an opportunity to share with us and with our viewers. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so that everybody can see your faces a little bit bigger. I'm going to go around and give you an opportunity. Tell us about your role in public service and how it is that in that role you serve the people of the state. And Dessa, we'll start with you.
Wonderful, thank you. So my role is Chief Data Officer. And usually when I describe what a Chief Data Officer does, people's eyes tend to glaze over because it's kind of a dry subject. For me, it's not very dry, but I'll work on being succinct in this one. So my focus is really on building strong foundations of data management. So this is data awareness, data literacy, building out infrastructure for tools and technology, and then the governance. So how is data being used? How is it being shared? How is it being organized? And all of this is done with an eye to enable agencies to use data to inform decision-making and evaluate programmatic outcomes. We also do this with a lens through data ethics and data equity to make sure that when we're using data to inform decisions, that we're looking at it holistically. We're understanding where biases and gaps of information can come in and how that could potentially skew the decisions that you're making. The way that I usually think about it is if you want to build something with Legos and you have just a bin of Legos, right? And you don't know, maybe you have 3 or 4 different bins of Legos and they're all jumbled in, but you know what you want to build. So what my role is I work with agencies and groups across the state to dump out those Legos and then organize the Legos at a one-time shop, organize them first, and then work with people to come up with processes and systems to maintain that organization over time, because it's a lot easier to build something when you know where the tools are that you need to use to build the thing. And so really where I think of data and what my role is within the state, it's empowerment, it's enablement, it's working with agencies to really evaluate what you're doing to make those decisions with data-informed methodology, and to have that support when it comes to facing some really gnarly data challenges.
And by gnarly, I'm sure you don't mean the hordes of data pieces that live in filing cabinets. So, yeah, it's a thing. Well, we are so glad you're here. We are so glad that you are helping us all better serve the residents of the state of Illinois by helping us make data-driven decisions. Robin, how about you? Tell us a little bit about how your role in public service, what all of it entails, because it sounds pretty sexy. It sounds like a true crime novel.
It really is not that sexy. it's not nearly as sexy as it sounds. The CSI has it all wrong. But I am honored to be a public servant. I knew that I always wanted to do something to be able to help people. So my background is in chemistry. I'm a scientist. And early on, I started out, I did an internship my freshman year in college, and it was working in a hair care working at a hair care company. And I watched the chemists work in the laboratory and formulate shampoos and conditioners. And I knew that I did not want to do that for 30, 40 years. I knew that whatever I did, I wanted to make a difference, and I wanted to be able to help people. And I think forensics is a great marriage between science and law enforcement in a way that we're able to help the public. So in my role, I oversee the Division of Forensic Services for the state police. It's made up of 2 different commands. On one side, it's the laboratory, which consists of non-sworn or civilian employees. They're mostly analysts and evidence technicians, and they analyze evidence that comes into the laboratory from agencies throughout the state. So they're responsible for analyzing evidence in drug chemistry, biology, latent prints, firearms. And then on the other side of the house, I have another command, and that command is the Scene and Evidence Services Command. And those are my sworn employees that help with evidence collection from crime scenes and traffic crashes. They collect evidence, and then they're usually responsible for submitting it to the laboratory for analysis. So I think that, like I said before, our marriage is really a great partnership between forensics or science and law enforcement.
And we're so glad that your teams have you to lead them and all the good work that they do. You know, anyone who's been a victim of a crime desperately wants the right information to come out, right?
Right.
And so my sister, who has this great fear of being framed, I tell her, don't worry, Robin and her team are on it. They'll get to the bottom of it. So again, thank you so much. Laura, let's take science from a different angle, engineering more than chemistry, which is the reason that I'm a lawyer and not a doctor, by the way. So Laura, tell us about your role in both with the state and how you serve the people of the state with the work that you do.
Okay, great. I will. Thank you so much for having me today. This is very exciting for us and for me because, you know, as we talked about, you know, we are public servants, and that has been something that's been a passion of mine since as long as I can remember. You know, I really get a lot out of serving people. And one thing that's wonderful about the job that I do is I get to serve people behind the scenes and make sure that they have a safe way of travel across the state of Illinois. And, you know, that gives me a lot of pride in being able to ensure that people have the right safety measures in place to make sure that they are getting from point A to point B. And so, you know, I'm behind the scenes. It's a little bit different of a science, right? Engineers are more problem solvers, and we use math and science as a basis for us to do that. So, you know, we look at an issue and we look at a problem and we say, okay, what can we do to fix it? What can we do to make that better? And so we do use a lot of math and science to do that, but we are coming at it, like you said, from a little different angle, right? So what I have done, you know, what I've done in my career is really serving taxpayers of Illinois and motorists within Illinois to make sure that they have a safe travel. And I've done that in a variety of different ways. You know, I started out my career working more on the planning and design side of things. And throughout, you know, the course of the last 20 to 25 years, I have, you know, kind of moved over into the construction aspect of things. So currently, right now, I cover all of these statewide contracts that provide improvements to our roads and bridges across the state of Illinois. I'm in our Central Bureau of Construction in Springfield, and so I provide guidance and direction to all of the 9 districts throughout the state. All of the 9 districts and their personnel are the boots on the ground. They're the ones that are overseeing those contracts on the day-to-day. What we do and what I do from my position in Springfield is I make sure that our guidance is giving our people in the district the best measures to make that happen in the most efficient way possible. And we look at ways to streamline those approaches, and that's something that I'm very passionate about, is giving people the tools that they need to get their jobs done as quickly and most efficient as possible. But we also look at trying to take a consistent approach across the state and making sure that we are using the same types of methods to implement those projects so that they are somewhat predictable to our contractors so that we can get the best job at the end of the day. We also, from my perspective, we look at making sure that contractors are paid timely. That's a big part of my job, to make sure that we have the tools available, you know, to get that done. And we also work with other bureaus in the department to make sure that we have a strong workforce, that workforce is diverse, that we are giving opportunities to some of our smaller businesses and some of our disadvantaged businesses so that we are representative of all of the communities within our state. So there's a lot of components to what we do at the department. The Central Bureau of Construction, which is what I'm working in right now, is just one component of a very large operation, but we work very well with the others in our department to make sure that we are, like I said, giving the taxpayers of Illinois and all of the motorists that drive through Illinois the safest and most efficient transportation network that we can provide.
Well, as someone who has recently driven the roads around Nashville, Tennessee, no offense to our friends in Tennessee, I love to visit. Yeah, it's a good way to lose a tire. So we thank you so much for your work. And I'm sure you're not at all busy with any of that work, probably at a lull, right? Because it's not like there's a big capital program, state and federal dollars. I'll be interested to see where that annual budget ends up in coming years. So I really liked your twist on science, and with engineering is problem solving, right? We all do that, so much of that in our day to day, and I can think of no larger problem to solve that we see in state government outside of standing up a new facility, making something out of literally beautiful nothing, right? It's built and it's beautiful. But we talk about, so where Dessa talks about foundations and infrastructure and all of those different pieces that we all face in our roles. Takira, I would love to hear about your role. I'm sure it's been a very busy year, 2 years, right? Just shy of 2 years, right? A very, very busy time in your career, I'm sure. So tell us a little bit about that role and about how you're serving the people. And you're in an interesting spot, right? Because you serve not just individual residents within the home, but then also their families and communities as well. So I would love to hear about you're really close to your service. So please take this opportunity to tell us a little bit more about it.
Thank you so much. So in my role as Senior Public Service Administrator, I have the distinct honor of caring for our nation's heroes, men and women who across our armed forces served our nation in representation of the state of Illinois. So I am grateful to have a very diverse team that I work with of leaders, nurses, doctors, support service workers, and together we all partner to ensure an amazing quality of life for the veterans that have entrusted us to their care. So you're right, it is a collaborative effort of caring not only for the veterans, but for their families. We have amazing community support as well that support our veterans while they're here. And so every day for me is a fun day. I get to see wonderful faces every day. We work to find ways to make their days meaningful, to make it fun, all the while ensuring their care and that they have the best quality of life. So it's always a fun day in the Chicago Veterans Home.
So Takira, one of the things that really jumped out to me about your description of your work is you can hear your compassion in your voice, right? So we talk about roles in government, right? You're an SPSA. Dessa probably is too. Robin, you probably are as well. Laura's probably in some weird IDOT technical manager title that is IDOT special kind of SPSA. But right, so we're talking about some of the most senior positions in government. And what I loved about hearing you talk about the way that you envision your role and the way that your role plays out every day, it's very, very close to the work. It's very close. It's very close to the humans you touch. It's close to the families. And I can't tell you enough, both thank you for the service that your team provides to our nation's heroes. Thank you in your private life for the support you give to our nation's armed forces. There's no harder job in the world, I don't think, than being a military spouse. It's a special kind of service. And I love that you bring all of that to your role. And I'm going to stay with you for our next question, Takira. I'm going to let you kick it off because our next question is really about the experiences that we've had as being, or that you've had as being a woman in your industry or in your position, right? You're the first and only home administrator of the Chicago Veterans Home. So I'm not sure that's probably the best avenue for comparison, but with your distinguished career in the industry and the challenges that we all hear about with respect to long-term care, with respect to healthcare in general, social services in general over the last 5, 10, 15 years, I would love to hear about how you think being a woman in that industry, how that has affected your experience, how you have encountered that industry, that work as a woman, because we bring it with us every day.
Sure. Thank you. So I think the heart of what I do is social services. That's where I started in healthcare in 2000. And it wasn't until I moved into a different healthcare agency in the year of 2007 that I encountered my very first female administrator. And you're right, that role, when I saw it played out in that home, was a lot different. It felt a lot warmer. It felt more like family. And I was very excited about that. It was my first time working with a female-led team. So the administrator was female, as was our director of nursing, and as was our regional operations manager. Up until that point, majority of those roles had been held by men in the operational systems that I work within. And working with that team really changed the trajectory of my career. It was the first time that I saw myself as a leader in healthcare. So I have to say 20 years later, I see more of those roles being held by women. I and my peer administrators across our state and joined by 4 additional women that operate in that role. So I'm in very good company. And I think that, there's nothing against gentlemen. They do a very good job and have paved the way for a lot of the things that women do now. But I think that there's always a special touch and a little softness that comes along when you have a lady in that position. And it comes with a different perspective, one of nurturing and one of caring, that I think our families really appreciate.
Thank you so much. It's interesting to hear about, so here are all of these 20-year careers and such, and I find it, that is so rich, and that is such a wealth of experience. And then I look at my career and I'm like, oh, dang, that's me too. How'd that happen, right? How did that happen? But I love that we're taking the opportunity to look back at our careers and share with people. Now, in looking at the participant list before we started, and again, this is being recorded and it'll be available for a whole host of other people to view as well, including those that may be earlier in their careers, right? I love hearing about your perspective on how things have changed, how you have, through the time in the industry that you work, that you have seen a shift. So we picked, for this Women's History Month, we picked careers that were in demand, both in government and in outside government, and also particularly, they also nicely kind of aligned with careers where women have not always had a stronghold, or women have had different challenges in kind of breaking into those industries. And I like hearing, as a mother of a 13-year-old girl, I want my 10-year-old boy to be successful as well, right? But hearing that hopefully she will, if her career takes her, or her career choices takes her down to some of your industries, that we can expect continued forward progress because of the work that you all are doing. The people who work under your leadership, Takira, that see you and see themselves in you. So I thank you for that work. I love that you both shared that that kind of history and experience, as well as kind of recognizing and driving home the importance of seeing women leaders and working with women leaders. So it's just warms my heart a bit. So brings me to Miss Dessa. So speaking of fields that are a touch male dominated, how's it going in IT, right? And I'd be interested to hear, Dessa, based on your particular work experience, both because you have public sector experience as well as nonprofit, which can lend itself to kind of a different makeup, and organizing. I would love to hear about, as a woman in IT, how's it been? How's it looking? Has being a woman in IT impacted your career?
So there's kind of two pieces to this, and I'm going to start with the womp womp one first. I will say that it has definitely been lonely. My path has been relatively lonely when I look around the room and see who are the other women who are doing this work at this level. And when I started, I graduated college in 2007 and came directly into data work right after that. And when I was in school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I knew that it was going to be mission-driven work. That both my parents were public school teachers. That was something that was just instilled in me, that you go out, you work within communities, you help communities. And so that's where organizing came in. And I very quickly realized that a lot of the organizing work that wasn't the outreach piece, so talking to people, was male dominated. And I came into data because that made sense. And I realized looking around the rooms that I was one of the only women in the Chicago area, in the state, doing this work on the data side. And I didn't, because I was self-taught, there weren't a lot of people to talk to about like, well, how do I do this? What is this pathway? What's next? What's next? And that definitely set the tone, because I was lucky enough to have a lot of mentors who were men who were telling me about their paths and what they had done. And I very quickly realized that's great. And I appreciate that they're working with me and taking the time to take me under their wing, but that wasn't going to be my path. That wasn't the same thing that I was working toward. And so when I started to get a little bit more senior, I was looking at how can I use my work to lift others up. And that's been kind of the cadence that I've looked at. So when I say it's been lonely, when I first started at my big national presidential campaign, on the data team, there were 15 people on the data team, and 3 of them were women. This was a national campaign. It wasn't, set in one state or another. This was national. 3 women. And that was really disheartening. And then I looked around at 2020, same type of environment, and at least half the people on the data analytics teams were women. So, looking from 2012 to 2020, 8 years, just how fast that changed, it has gotten a lot better in the representation of gender diversity and other types of diversity, but specifically with gender identity, that's changed a lot. And I will say, even, when I look at the state level CDO roles right now, so there's, I think, 26 states that have current CDOs, only about 30% of those are held by women. And so this has been a sea change over years, that we have more women coming in at the junior levels, rolling up and figuring out those pathways to advancement. But because I've taken a non-traditional path, I went from organizing to nonprofit work. As soon as I came into the advocacy side, all of a sudden there were women in leadership, right? There's executive directors who are women. There are COOs and CFOs and people who are running the organizing side who are all women. And it was the first time that I looked around a room and went, oh, there's a lot of us out here just not in the same industry or the niche industry that I started in. And so how can we start being force multipliers and working together to say, oh, you have a young intern, or you have somebody that you're working with that has an interest in data. How can we work together to get them into a path? Or, hey, I've got a comms person that's great. Can you mentor her? Can you talk to her to see if there's an opportunity for advancement around that? And so it's been lonely, but there's so many opportunities to create the mentorship and sponsorship pathways when there's so few of you, that it's been really exciting. And that's the other piece, is that while it's been lonely, it's also been really exciting. And I probably shouldn't say this, but because there's no roadmap for somebody like me, I graduated with a history degree and a business degree. Right? I don't have a background in data analytics. I've been making this up as I go along, just finding those pieces and those places where I can be mission driven and lend some of my compassion, lend some of my perspective, like what Takira was talking about, we come with a different perspective to these roles because of our femininity, right? And so we're looking at things through a different lens. And with data, I'm able to connect to the human side of it. So there's always a human behind the numbers, right? Every data point is a human in real life. And so that's where I come in, and I'm able to work with people and say, okay, it's not about hard, cold numbers and, we're going to run this algorithm. It's what are we solving for? How can we have a big impact on people's lives? How can we do this work and center the human in front of it? And how can we make sure that all the work that we're doing isn't exacerbating problems and challenges in already vulnerable communities? And so in that sense, it's been really exciting because I bring all of that from organizing to nonprofits to a software company that I worked at for a few years, and then to Cook County, where I was the first CDO, that I took all of this data work out of numbers and put it more into storytelling, more into what are we trying to do and what are the ways that we can get there that isn't just throwing numbers at a wall and say, we're going to follow what that number says, but what are the actions we can take? What can we measure? And how are we going to be at the end of the day switching and saying, we tried this, it didn't work, but we still want to march toward this outcome. So let's brainstorm together, collaborate, work across all these functional areas to come up with a good solution that, mitigates as much harm as possible.
Thanks for that. I thought you would have an interesting perspective because when I heard nonprofit, right? Nonprofit, both in the outcome, sometimes the outcome of the organization as well as the payment of the employees, right? So we see that is an area, unfortunately, where the mission calls women, or women hear that call, and then some of the impact, right? So you talk about, and what's that data tell us, right? And so we've seen here in the state over the last few years, Equal Pay Act amendments. So we're not asking about that salary. So if you spent 10 years in a nonprofit where you were not, because of the mission, you weren't compensated comparatively to your private sector for-profit peers, that's not going to impact, that shouldn't impact how we compensate you for the work we want you to do, right? So those kinds of things that are, that the social science researchers will tell us overwhelmingly impact women, and particularly women of color, we've seen steps in the right direction along that way. I also loved your references to internships and cross-collaboration. It's getting to be intern time, and the state has a large internship program that's actually run out of the governor's office. It was the Michael Curry summer intern program. I encourage you all to think that way. So, for example, when last year we had an intern that worked with our data analytics team here at CMS, had some I had the best talk with this guy where I was working from home and I ran to my bedroom and went and grabbed a Nazi knife that my husband's grandfather had gotten in World War II, because this guy was a German history minor, and we just had this great, I'm like, look what I have. And he's like, that's so cool, right? But that was helpful for his career, but his supervisor at the agency, our data analytics manager, who's now our deputy director, spent time getting to know what his interests were and connected him to folks across the enterprise. So continue to do that with one another. We are one state. We are one, in a lot of ways, we're one big employer, and where we're not, we're getting there slowly with help from our friends at Do It. So I appreciate that, and women in leadership have learned over time how to be people connectors, right? And so we need to continue to do that. Robin, so I will tell you, and I've shared this with you before, in the course of my longer than I care to admit career, or that I can even understand career, I have spent some time with the ISD Forensics Command. I will tell you, you are the first woman that I have known to hold that role. So whether there were women before you, I'm not sure, but I will say, at least for my long-term state government girl, since I was myself a student worker and then an intern, all of my experiences and awareness of the ISP Forensics Command has had men at the helm. So talk to us a little bit about how being a woman in your industry, both just in kind of the really hard sciences as well as in forensics, how that has impacted your experience, and whether or not you have it, and if you have an opinion to share with respect to, your career has all been in government, right? Both with the federal government, Iowa state government, and then Illinois state government. I would like to hear whether you have any opinions on that front as well.
Yes, there. My entire career has been in government. But the one thing about forensics, unlike a lot of the other sciences, it's the one discipline that is heavily populated by women, unlike a lot of the sciences. So I haven't had any lack of female role models in the career, and I've also been fortunate to have a number of female mentors. So it's been great in that aspect. You come into the laboratory and you're not the only woman in the lab, or the only woman in the building. So it's probably we're probably predominantly women in the laboratories. But the other part of my job is in law enforcement. And, in law enforcement, there's not nearly as many women. The population is not nearly as many women as there are men in law enforcement. So in that respect, you look around, you go to a conference or a meeting, and it's predominantly male or men in the room. And actually, at the command, the forensic laboratory, the command right now the commander is a woman, and we've had a number of different women commanders over forensics, and we've actually had a number of women hold my position as the deputy director over the division. But overall in ISP, there aren't nearly as many women throughout the department in law enforcement. So they're always recruiting and always looking to increase the number of women in the ranks. But I'm hoping that as a woman, that other women in the department will see me as a positive example. And I try to mentor a number of scientists in the laboratories throughout my career. So I'm hoping to use that influence and to help with hiring and recruitment, to recruit more women into either law enforcement field, or always into forensics, because even though there are a number of women in forensics, we can always use more.
Right? That's what does RBG say? The right number of female Supreme Court justices is 9, right?
That's right. That's right. That's right.
So, Robin, that's so interesting, because you really are, you have a foot kind of in two very different, like you oversee two very different buckets of folks, right? Your work, while it's a close marriage, that is very interesting. And it's gives me an opportunity for a shameless plug for some of our other Women's History Month work, 2 particular things that you raised. So if you haven't taken a perusal, or you don't follow CMS on Facebook or LinkedIn, I encourage you to do so. Over the months, we've been highlighting women in various in-demand careers: IT, healthcare, science, and public safety. And one fantastic leader in Robin's organization, Colonel McGreal, was our video spotlight for public safety. And, Robin, it was funny you mentioned that there's lots of women in the lab. One of our our employee spotlight for science is an environmental scientist from EPA. And in talking to her ahead of that, she mentioned that, and she was born in Mexico. So we talked about how she got to Springfield and kind of that part of her journey. But she actually met her husband in the lab. Oh, there's lots of lab romances. And so, so I was like, see, yes, there is diversity in the lab. Very good. So Robin, thank you so much for your commitment to continuing to mentor women and to continue to be that example so that for the women and girls that come after you. Very much appreciate it. And I'm glad to hear that you know it's first. That's great. Laura, you're up, ma'am, and we would be remiss if we talked about male-dominated fields without talking about the Illinois Department of Transportation. So I know lots of great women out there, of course, but transportation is an industry that's been harder for women to crack than some. So please share with us your experience.
Yes, glad to. It's like you said, engineering has been something, it's been a field that's been male dominated for a long, long time, right? And, when I graduated with my civil engineering degree, I was one of 3 women in my graduating class. So, that was 20 plus years ago. And I'm pleased to say that over the last 20 years, things have gotten better. And more women are coming into the engineering field, and it's so good to see that. I've been very fortunate throughout my career to have other women that have paved the way for me, for me and other women, honestly. But again, like Robin was, saying, or I think Dessa was saying, it can be a little lonely at times, so. It is a little different, being the only female in the room. And, that's happened on a number of occasions. I think that I'm one of the few women that have risen to top management. And I think, like I said, over the last few years, we're getting better at moving women up into those upper management positions. Part of it is, there's not a lot of us yet that have 20 plus years of experience and can get there, but we're making progress, and we're making a lot of progress. From an engineering standpoint, civil engineering covers a lot of bases, right? So one of the wonderful things about civil engineering is you can find a niche on so many different, aspects of it. So, your day-to-day activities as a civil engineer could be anywhere from, 100% in the office to 100% out in the field and anything in between. And so, what's nice about civil engineering is there's so many different opportunities out there. But where I am right now and focusing on the construction side of things, we see less females typically in the construction side of things and in the field work than we do in the planning and the design aspect of things. But that is changing, and we're seeing a lot more females, crossing over into the field work. But it has been a unique opportunity. I can't tell you how many times I have been in a meeting of 30, 40, 50 people and looking around the room, and sometimes I'm the only female, and sometimes I'm one of 3 or 4. But it depends, right? I mean, if I'm working with a bunch of people from the construction industry, there's going to be less and less females in that room. But if I'm in a meeting with a lot of people from the design aspect of things, there's going to be more females. But I'm hoping that those barriers are being broken, and I'm very excited to have been put in these positions to be able to give that aspiration maybe for other females that are coming, down the line. I know for me that was hugely instrumental. Whenever I started at IDOT, most of our upper management, was all male dominated. But I would say, within the first 5 to 10 years of my career, we were seeing, more females being promoted into those upper level positions. And it really did, you know, helped to give me that thought of, you know, well, hey, I could maybe do that too, you know, or, you know, and so it is helpful to see those barriers being broken, you know, but I will say though too that, you know, I was very fortunate, you know, growing up, you know, I have one sister, no brothers, and my parents, you know, never really gave us the impression that there was anything holding us back. And, you know, I will say that, you know, my dad encouraged my sister and myself both to go into engineering. We were both very, you know, good at math and science. And, you know, he was very instrumental in saying, hey, you know what, you guys could be really good at this. And never once did I say, oh, but Dad, I'm a girl. Is that going to be okay? Because it never really crossed my mind that wouldn't be okay. You know, and I know that he did, you know, I know that in those conversations, you know, it was, hey, you know, we need more females in this, you know, this area. But at the same time, I never really felt like that was going to be a barrier. I guess I was very encouraged that you have what it takes and, you know, do your best. And you'll get there, you know? So I was very fortunate in that. My sister, you know, became a successful engineer as well. And so, you know, I'm very fortunate for that. And I realized that, you know, that's not always typical, right? But it is different, you know? So I was a little bit prepared for that when I got into college, and it was a lot of, you know, a lot of males. But at the same time, you know, I've got some really good friendships with a lot of the men that I have worked with. And I think it was Dessa that mentioned, you know, they've been very, very good mentors to me and helping me to, you know, navigate some of these difficult situations. But I will say this, that over my entire career, the men that I have worked with have been very supportive of me moving forward in my career. I never really felt that anyone was trying to hold me back. So that was, you know, I've been very fortunate with that. And I think, you know, I work with some very strong professionals in the engineering world. And IDOT is a professional organization. We have, you know, we have professional people that want to see the best, you know, at the end of the day, and they don't care, you know, what color your skin is or what gender you are. They're going to put whoever is best, you know, into the position. So, you know, that's been very fortunate. I've been in a very, you know, I've been very fortunate across my career to not really be held back in those regards. But it is different, you know, like Dessa had mentioned, you know, sometimes it's a little lonely when you look around and you're the only female in the room, you know, and sometimes the topics of sidebar conversations are, you know, a little less interesting to me, you know, a lot of, you know, guy talk, maybe, if you want to call it that. But you know, it's been a very good experience. And I'm excited. I'm excited to be part of the future. I'm excited to give the next women following me the same kind of encouragement that the women before me gave to me. So I'm really excited about that. I believe I'm the first female appointed to statewide construction engineer. So that's very exciting. That barrier has been broken. And I was one of, if not the first females appointed to the project implementation engineer, which was my previous role prior to this. So I'm very excited to be part of that next generation. And so, you know, it's like I said, it's been a good experience, and I'm looking forward to the next, you know, 5 to 10 to 15 years to come. So
that's fantastic, and congratulations to you. Look at us here at the state of Illinois, trading in our glass ceiling for Willy Wonka's glass elevator, right? Nothing can stop us. With the last 9 minutes that we have, I want to ask you all what advice you would have for job seekers considering a career with the state and or with government. And Laura, we're going to stay with you. What advice do you have for job seekers considering state employment?
Yes, I would encourage everyone to, you know, be determined in what you know, right? Be determined and don't be afraid to stand up for what you know. and be confident in that. And sometimes it's a little difficult whenever, like I said, if you're going into a male-dominated field, sometimes that can be a little intimidating. But be confident in what you know. And also, what I would say is don't ever be afraid to ask questions. I feel like, especially in the engineering world, asking questions makes you a better engineer. It makes you a better leader. And I think people recognize that when you're asking questions, you want to get to the truth. And that builds your credibility. And your credibility is worth so much as you're building your career. That's going to take you farther than anything. And I do think sometimes when we're women, in a male field, sometimes we feel like we're being judged a little bit. And so there's a little bit of hesitation to admit when you don't have all the answers, because, you feel like, if you say, well, I don't know, then somebody's going to say, well, I told you she wouldn't know, she's just a girl or whatever. And so I think there's a little bit of that, even though we don't always want to admit it, there's a little bit of that underneath it all. But you have to be confident in what you know. You have to understand and admit what you don't know, and ask those tough questions and bring yourself to the table, because I'll tell you, the more that you show your desire and your ability to understand an issue and to solve that issue based on a lot of your different experiences, that's going to build your credibility. And that is worth so much more than always having the right answer. And so, that's the advice that I would give, to anyone that's really looking to be in one of these types of fields. The other thing, and I think that Takira had mentioned this earlier as well, is that I think as women, we are just kind of naturally well-rounded decision makers. And so, I do think that, and I don't know, maybe it's our, chemical makeup, biologically, I don't know, but I do feel like, oftentimes women do have a desire to nurture and to make the world a better place. And I think that, being in public service is a fantastic opportunity to solve those goals. And, I do think, women that are interested in science and math, civil engineering, and particularly working for a state agency like the Illinois Department of Transportation, gives us the opportunity to use the skills that we're really good at, but also have that benefit and that good feeling of knowing that the work that we're doing is making the world a better place and having a direct impact on the day-to-day lives and activities of the people that cross the state of Illinois. That is hugely rewarding. And so I would recommend, if anybody is interested in these kinds of careers, take this opportunity, to further that passion, so to speak.
Thank you, Laura. And that brings us to Takira and mission driven, right? Takira and Dessa, I think, both use that. So Takira, people in healthcare right now are unhappy. Life's been really hard the last 3 years. And if you're talking to a healthcare, social services job seeker, what's your advice for them about coming to work for the state?
Well, I think when people think of healthcare, they don't automatically equate that with state service, or that they only think of healthcare as being a direct care provider. They think nurse, they think doctor. And I think the ladies on our panel today really represent the broad spectrum of what healthcare is. Healthcare is transportation. Healthcare is technology. I had the pleasure of working with 2 female architectural engineers that were involved in the design of this building. Healthcare is security. So when you think about that, all those different opportunities and backgrounds and experiences have a place not only in healthcare, but in state service. So I would say to those ladies that didn't realize that there were those opportunities, there is a place for you, and come join us.
I love it. So 2 of my taglines, another shameless plug, and one of my favorite things is I've scoured my brain for a job that exists that does not exist at the state. And the only one I can come up with is an embalmer. Literally any other job in the world other than embalming, because we contract that out. We don't employ embalmers, but anything else you want to do, come do it with us. And I'd encourage you to go look at our healthcare video. One of a fantastic, right, Takira, she works for you, right? The cook at the Veterans Home was one of she was fantastic. You talk about healthcare and caring and in the broad spectrum of that, she gave us a great spot. And cognizant of time, Dessa, how about you?
Yeah.
What would you tell job seekers?
Bring your curiosity. So to play off what everybody else has said, especially in my world, a lot of data is digging. It's problem solving, it's thinking, it's big picture work, but it's all kind of poking at how does this work? How does this come together? How can we take something apart and build it again in a better, more equitable, more ethical way? So my advice is bring your curiosity. The state is massive. And as you just said, there's every job you could think of. So if you have a healthcare focus, you have a business or finance focus, you have an education focus, operations, if that is where you're looking, there's a role for you. So come in, eyes wide open, know that it's never going to be boring. A lot of people think about government as paper pushing and like, how am I going to fill the time? I can tell you in my 4 years at Cook County and the state of Illinois, I have never had a boring day in my life. So bring your curiosity and prepare to have your mind blown.
Thank you. So, sometimes we pray for a boring day, and those are the ones that I'm very scared of. All right, Robin, bring us home. What is your advice for a job?
Okay, I'll close this out. I think my advice would be to, if you're seeking a job in public service, in forensics, in any of the fields that are represented today, any of the fields that the ladies on this panel spoke about, would be to do your research, to look into and know what you need to do, what background you need to have. If you need a degree in that field, make sure you know what that degree is and do your background to know exactly what you need to have in order to get that job. And there's nothing holding you back. I think we've all shown that there are no doors that are closed for women in any of these fields. The doors are open. The only thing holding you back is you. So if you want the job in data, in healthcare, in technology, in forensics, in law enforcement, you can get that job. You're the only one that can hold you back from getting that job. There aren't any doors that are closed for women.
And I'm so glad for it. Lots of our predecessors could not say the same. And so we thank them. Take a minute and Women's History Month here to thank those who came before us and put us in the positions that we are in to be able to affect positively the lives of Illinois residents. And with that, we are closing out our final event of Women's History Month, CMS celebrating Women's History Month. This recording will be available on the Women's History Month page at the CMS website. And if you have in your mind someone who needs to see, that is a public-facing site. So, your college-age daughters or nieces or neighbors, share with them the valuable experience of our panelists. I thank you all so very much for taking the time out of your very busy schedules to share with us your experiences. And most importantly, I thank you for your continued service, both as a state employee and as a citizen of the state. I thank you so very much. And I wish everyone well and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Recording.